Hello, everyone. Today we are going to talk about parts of speech. Parts of speech are the different types of words that we have in the English language, and there are four main categories that you need to know about today. So the first one is nouns, then we have verbs, adverbs, and adjectives. Now, nouns are words that are people, places, or things. Generally speaking, they're either concepts or things that you can touch. So dog is a noun, or hope is a noun. Next up, though, we have verbs, and verbs are actions or states of being. And we'll talk a little bit more about what a state of being is in just a little bit, but you can think of verbs right now as action words. What is happening in the sentence? What is happening in the passage? That's a verb. Next up, we have adverbs, and adverbs are words that describe verbs, so they describe how something is being done. And then finally, we have adjectives, which are words that describe nouns. So they describe what something or someone is like. Now let's look at a few examples. We have this sentence here, and both of the nouns in the sentence are highlighted or underlined. So our sentence says, the boy chased after the mangy dog. Boy and dog are both nouns. They're both things that you could touch. There's a person there. There's an animal there. Those are nouns. Here's another example. The garden was blooming with flowers. In this sentence, garden and flowers are both nouns. Moving on, though, let's start looking at some verbs. The boy chased after the mangy dog. In this sentence, chased is underlined because that's our action. Therefore, that is our verb. Again, remember that a verb is an action. Verbs are so essential to the English language because they show what is happening in any situation. And so our verb here is chased. Another one. The cattle were grazing in the pasture. Were grazing is underlined. That's our verb. And in this situation, it's actually a verb phrase. There are two words working together that both act as the verb. We're going to talk a little bit more about why that is in just a minute. We're going to talk about types of verbs in just a moment. But I do want you to know right now that verb phrases can contain multiple verbs working together. So when I say verb phrase, that means that there's multiple words. They're all acting as a verb together as a team. Next up, though, let's look at some adverbs. In our sentence here, we have the cattle were grazing peacefully in the pasture. You'll notice that peacefully describes how they were grazing. So in other words, we have a word that describes a verb. If we have a word that describes a verb or how something is happening, that is an adverb. Here's another example. The woman walked quickly into the meeting. Quickly describes how the verb is happening, how the walking is happening, therefore it's an adverb. And what you might notice in both of these examples is that they end in ly. Not all adverbs end in ly, but most of them do. So if you see a word that has ly at the end of it, it is most likely an adverb. That's not true 100% of the time, but it's true like 90% of the time. So watch for those lys. That probably means it's an adverb. On to the last category, though, we have adjectives. Adjectives are words that describe nouns. So let's look at this one. That mean-looking kid stole my money. Mean-looking describes the kid. A kid is a noun. It's a thing. It's a person. Mean-looking is what's describing that noun. And because we are describing a noun, we know it's an adjective. Here's another example for you. The ugly duckling turned into a swan. Duckling is a noun. Ugly describes duckling. Therefore, ugly is an adjective. Adjectives are words that describe nouns. It's easy to mix up adjectives with adverbs because they both are descriptive words. However, adverbs describe verbs. That's why they have verb inside of them. And that's how you can keep them straight. Adverbs describe verbs. Adjectives describe nouns. Now let's move on to types of verbs. A minute ago, I told you that there were multiple types of verbs and we were going to talk about that more. And I want to briefly review the types of verbs that you're going to be looking for in the English language. So first off, here's our list. We have action verbs, and action verbs are the verbs that you typically think of when you think of a verb. Action verbs are single words that show some sort of action happening. Kicked, run, chased. Those are action verbs because they describe an action. Next up, though, we have helping verbs. And helping verbs are small verbs that change the tense of the action verb. So as you probably already know, in English, we have past tense, present tense, and future tense. If I said, I went to the store yesterday, went is in the past tense. So helping verbs are small verbs that change the tense of our action verb, and I'm going to show you some examples of those in just a moment. Next up, we have linking verbs. And linking verbs are small verbs that connect a noun to a description and show that there's some sort of state of being happening in the sentence. So in other words, there's not necessarily an action per se, but there's a noun being attached to a description. Let's look at some examples. First off, this is an action verb. The mean-looking kid stole my money. Stole is something that's happening. It's an action. That's an action verb. Next up, though, let's look at a helping verb. I will wash my car on Friday. Now, wash is our action verb, but the interesting thing happening here is the helping verb will. All that word is doing, will. All will is doing here is changing the tense of wash. It's putting it into future tense for us. It is helping that action verb become future tense. Because it is helping that action verb change its tense, it is called a helping verb. Let's look at a linking verb. I thought the movie was really funny. So thought is an action verb. It's something that's happening. But then was, our linking verb, that's connecting or linking a noun to a description. Movie is our noun. Really funny is our description. And all our verb was is doing is connecting that noun, movie, to the description. Really funny. That's all it's doing. But it's called a linking verb because it shows that something exists. It shows a state of being. The movie does exist, and the way it's existing is by being really funny. And it's also linking that noun with the description like we mentioned before. Now, linking verbs can be hard to identify, but the nice thing about them is that there is only 8 of them. So if you look at this list, this is our list of linking verbs. And if you can remember this list, then you know all the linking verbs that there are, and you don't need to worry about others. So our linking verbs are be, am, is, are, was, were, been, being. Those are all the linking verbs that you need to know. This list is really important so that you can identify those small linking verbs in sentences, even if you're not sure something's a verb. Because if you look at this sentence, it's hard to figure out that was is a verb. It doesn't seem like it's an action, so it doesn't quite make sense. But if you can remember that it's a to be linking verb, then you'll be able to spot it. Now, today we've talked about parts of speech. There are 4 main types that we talked about today. Nouns, which are person, people, place, or thing. Verbs, which are an action. Adverbs, which are words that describe verbs. And then adjectives, which are words that describe nouns. After we talked about that, we talked about the different types of verbs. And there are action verbs, there are linking verbs, and then there are also helping verbs. If you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, thanks for watching.